air quotes, infused with the scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a movie and TV podcast that covers a specific topic, be it genre, trope, movie, or show each episode. You can find more of our work at obsessiveviewer.com, and you can also, and while every episode will always be free, if you'd like to support what we do here, you can become a patron at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for tons of bonus audio content that runs the gamut of movie, TV, book reviews, immediate reaction movie reviews, full Patreon potpourri episodes, movie commentary tracks, and much more. Right now I'm doing a series of read-along reviews of Stephen King works that involve Holly Gibney, his recurring character that started in the Bill Hodges trilogy and is about to have her own novel here in a few weeks. So I've done 15 episodes for the last 15 weeks, covering bit by bit everything that she's been in. So I'm very excited to be coming to the end of that to go into Holly, the novel that's coming out in September. But that's just one small piece of stuff that is of a wealth of I think up to almost 600 pieces of audio content on Patreon itself. So check that out. If you have the means, the funds, and everything, check it out. Patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd at obsessiveviewer and on TikTok at OV Podcasts. And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Gran Turismo, which is, I have it here that's currently in theaters, but it's actually opening in theaters August 25th, I believe. So that is what we're going to be doing tonight. And joining me for that is, of course, Tiny, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks. Hey. How are you doing?
I am doing quite well. We did a Patreon recording, so that was fun. Talked about a bunch of stuff. And now we're talking Gran Turismo, so that should be it should be a good night. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. It feels like we haven't had an Obsessive Viewer episode in a little while. The last one you and I did was Oppenheimer. Yep. So how you been? How's it been in terms of movies and TV for you outside of what we're going to talk about in Patreon and in the review?
It's been pretty good. Not a ton of movies, at least not a ton of new movies. Kind of watched some old stuff. And I'm trying to get caught up on some TV and watch some stuff. The wife, actually yesterday, I had the day off yesterday after a weekend of racing stuff. And my wife and I watched the entire latest season of Outlander.
Oh, wow.
Which was good. I mean, it's only 8 episodes, but it was good. It was a really good episode, or a good season. So it comes out. It's on Stars, and it comes out like one episode per week, and so we've just been letting it build up for the last 10 or 12 weeks, and it was good.
Nice. Have you been keeping up with the strikes or anything?
Not much, no, not really.
We don't really need to talk about it or anything. I talked about it with Andy a little bit. Andy Carr in the Barbie episode, but I haven't really been keeping up with it all that much, but it's kind of crazy.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of shortage we're going to see and when we're going to see it,
I do too. I know that some things have been moved, like Craven moved to next year. But I'm curious what's going to happen if Dune is going to get delayed or what have you. So
that would be a bummer. Is Dune supposed to come out same time as last one, like December-ish?
I think it's going to be like October or November. I think November.
Okay. Yeah. Hopefully they have it figured out by then.
Yeah. I don't know that they will in terms of the strike and everything.
Yeah, I know they've been saying potentially late fall. I know, I know they've been saying that. I guess one thing I have kind of followed on it is just it's kind of amazing to see some of the actors and other professionals for that matter showing like their actual like screenshots of their residual checks.
Yeah.
That's like 30 cents
Mhm.
for a quarter. And it's like, I can't remember who the actor was, but he was like, I was like the third lead on this limited series. I was in 8 out of the 9 episodes or whatever. And he's like, I got a check for like $21.
Jesus.
And I was like, holy shit. And it was someone like a BC list actor. I'd heard of him before, but I was just like, that's not right. Like, I don't know how anyone could argue that that's not a problem. Like,
oh, absolutely. And it's really interesting to me too, that like the way that I view it, or the way that I've kind of thought about it in my brain, is that like even like back in the day, like before streaming and everything, like there was a lot of like, it was a source of comedy in like on Friends, like saying like, oh yeah, I don't know if they actually did this on Friends, but like in TV, there would be like bits or comedy about like, oh, residual checks, or like people would talk about their residual checks where it's like you get like pennies on the dollar for reruns for shows and everything. And like, to put it into perspective, it's so interesting that like even then, like, yeah, that they're on this old model that it's like, okay, if a show goes into syndication, and like I know that if a show that they appeared on went into syndication and that episode aired on TV, ad supported everything, because there's ads and everything, ad breaks, they get residuals from that viewing, from that single performance of that episode. And like, I remember there being talk, and I've talked about it before, and I'm sure people know this, but like one of the most lucrative jobs in television was directing the pilot episode of a show that went to series, because the way that it was set up back then, at least, is that if you direct the pilot episode of a show and it goes to series, then anytime any episode of that show airs on television, you get residuals for that. And if it runs for 5 seasons, that's literally every episode that airs, you get a piece of that. But it's so interesting to me, because now it's like, now we're in the streaming age where there's some ad support and everything, but there's also these mega corporations that are running these things, Netflix and Hulu, they do not give the data for how much performance their content is performing, like how many times people are viewing it and everything. They'll do like those cute little like, oh, 1 billion minutes of Suits has been streamed on Netflix. We don't know the context of that though. That's PR.
Right.
But it's like, it's insane to me that now, like, you had this fixed model that is, people would get residuals for airing of episodes that they were in that was on a scheduled, over the air, cable, whatever, TV schedule. But now it is so open that like anyone can just like, it is, everyone has access to anything at any point. And like the fact that the people who make the content that is driving people to sign up for these services, or to use this service, or to watch the ads on this service, if it has ads and everything, are not getting compensated for their work, because they are just viewed as like, oh, we just created this. Like, okay, we're just feeding the machine. It's just, it's insane. It's insane how much money is just being withheld from the people who make the art. I don't know. That's my little rant.
Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. And it's, there's a different, it's a different universe now. Like I'd be curious to see the cost differences between, running a show like Friends in the 90s versus, you know, a modern show that's on a streaming service. Like, what are the costs to Netflix / NBC, one versus the other? Like, what's more expensive? I would think that maybe streaming is more affordable, but I really don't know. I don't know. I'd be curious, because, you know, like the like NBC, technically, the infrastructure for the broadcast of that show is just public airways, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's just, NBC is just public. They don't have to, like, versus Netflix, they have to pay or presumably have their own servers and maintenance for servers to host someone to be able to stream that show. You know, I just don't know what those costs are, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But I would think maybe it's cheaper now, but maybe I'm wrong. It's a whole. But again, kind of like to your point, be transparent about it. Like,
exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you? You know.
Right. It's insane, and that is so interesting. I don't know. I think that it would be, if anything else, I think that the production side of it, the cost of production for series on streaming services, is, without adjusting for inflation or anything, I think that it is considerably cheaper than conventional, like, on-air series for at least one specific reason, and that is let's go two reasons. One is, by and large, the streaming platform necessitates or is brought out to do more shortened seasons. So it's no longer a 24 season or 24 episode like drama series. It's a 10 episode drama series. And the way that those shows are written and produced is in like I just read Burn It Down by Maureen Ryan. It's all about kind of just the culture of abuse and corruption in the Hollywood system, and in particular in filming for television. And one of the things that she brings up in that is that a writer for like a television writer could have and an actor even could have a secure job for 10 months out of the year or 9 months out of the year because they were working on a 22 episode season. That would be job security. But now they have 8 or 10 episode seasons that they bring in a writer's room. They work for maybe 2 months, and then they're out of work for the remaining 10 months of the year. So it is creating this unsustainability within Hollywood, that the people who are making this content in this industry, who are the creative forces of it, literally cannot earn a living because it has changed so drastically. And I think that that's at the heart of what the strike's about and everything. And it pisses me off. Like, people will not think, either they won't be aware of this, which I don't feel like anyone should. Like, it's no one's fault if they're just not aware of the ins and outs of the industry and everything, obviously, because I barely am. But it's the people who kind of like scoff at it and saying like, Tom Cruise wants more money. It's like, no, that's not, like, it's like any other industry. Like, there are people that are trying to earn a living, and it's hard enough to do that in this country as it is. Yeah, so it's just that kind of gets my goat a little bit.
Yeah. I saw an interesting, I remember like maybe a year and a half ago, it could have been even 2 years ago. Sydney Sweeney, the actress from Euphoria, got in a little bit of heat. I don't know if you remember this, but I don't remember the exact context, but basically she had been doing like a ton of modeling, and she had been like doing like endorsements and commercials, and like a bunch of stuff other than acting. And I think someone like was interviewing her, and they asked her like, so you're doing a lot of this stuff, and like, what's the deal? And she was like, well, I can't really afford to take a break because, I mean, she's like, I just can't really afford to take a break. And everybody was like, well, what are you talking about? And like, she didn't get to provide any more context. And then like, people were like giving her shit. Like, you're on this hugely successful show and you're one of the main stars and you're super famous. What the hell are you talking about? Well, when this strike happened, everyone was like, okay, well, let's analyze this. Euphoria has had 2 seasons. Oh, and like the first season came out in 2019. The second season came out in 2022. So that's 3 years separates.
Yeah.
8 episodes and then 8 episodes. And someone did like, the going rate, and like someone did the math, and they were like, so she probably made the first season, she might have made like $100,000. The second season, she might have made like $500,000, but taxes and your manager fees and all this, they were like, over 4 or 5 years, she probably made like $250,000.
Yeah.
Off of Euphoria. And I was like, holy fuck, that's not, that's not nothing, but over 4 or 5 years, that's not a lot of money. And
no.
And like everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people were like, I feel bad for giving her shit because she really has not made a lot of money from Euphoria, and
right.
So that's why she has, obviously, she does more modeling than she does acting. And it's like, well, yeah, no shit. Cause it's quick cash and it's easy. And that was kind of eye opening for me. I wasn't critical when she came out and said that. I was like, yeah, she probably hasn't made a ton of money, but whatever. I just didn't really care.
Right.
But it's interesting to see that come full circle. That was an interesting example.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Yeah, and I just like those high profile shows. It's kind of interesting to see or to hear about like the ins and outs of them, and yeah, it's interesting.
Right.
Yeah. But speaking of, I don't know, I don't have a segue for this. Anything else about the strikes?
Truly a tangent there.
Yep. But yeah, we at Obsessive Viewer Studios stand with the WGA and SAG-AFTRA.
For sure.
Yeah. So yeah. But today on the show, Tiny, we're going to be reviewing Gran Turismo.
Yes.
So this movie, we're going to kind of dive into this here in a bit. We're going to, of course, we're going to do a non-spoiler review and then a spoiler review. We'll do a clip from the trailer to spread that out. Check the show notes and everything for ways to navigate the spoiler section and all of that. But Tiny, before we get into the actual review, I have a couple of questions for you in regards to our kind of pre-roll for this review. The first being Gran Turismo as a video game property. For those who don't know, it's a long-standing PlayStation exclusive, so it's a PlayStation video game franchise. The main kind of appeal of it is that it is it's like the real driving simulator or whatever. It's like it's incredibly detailed, and it is the most authentic like race experience in video games from what I understand. I've played several entries in it. It's always very frustrating because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I do like it. It's very immaculately detailed and interesting. Tiny, I know that you don't really play video games or anything, but I know that you have had several incarnations of PlayStation. Did you ever play Gran Turismo? What's your history with the franchise as a video game?
Oh yeah, played the shit out of Gran Turismo.
Nice.
My first gaming system was a PlayStation 1, and my brother and I played a little bit of Gran Turismo 2 on that, and that was fun. But then what really woke it up was on PlayStation 2. Gran Turismo 3 came out, and that was like a game changer. Like I'm not kidding. I bet my brother and I, between the two of us, probably logged 350 hours on Gran Turismo 3.
Nice.
Probably more than that. Like we actually beat the game, which is it's a big challenge. Like it's hard to do.
Nice.
It's kind of like a MMORPG or whatever, a big RPG game. It's a challenge to beat it. And like I remember, because at the time this was like 99, 2000, maybe 2001 in there. I wanted Gran Turismo was really big on controller video game controller evolution. Like I think it was one of the first games to ever use haptic feedback. Like a rumble pack was one of the first games to ever do that. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. But they were real big on their like true simulation stuff. And so you could they had like 3 different levels. You could buy a special actual controller that was Gran Turismo based. That was a little more haptic driven. I can't remember the specifics, but we ended up getting that.
Oh, wow.
But then,
nice.
Yeah, but it was like, I mean, I think it was like $60-$70 back in the day, which now it probably would have been like $100. But anyways, the next one was you could get an actual like gas pedal, brake pedal, and clutch pedal that sat on the floor.
Yeah.
And then you could have a steering wheel that sat on like a table. So you could like sit at a desk and have like do the full thing. And I wanted that so fucking bad when we were kids. It was, I think it was like $250, and like I think we asked for it like 2 Christmases in a row, and my parents were like, "That's not like it's almost the price of a PlayStation. Like we're not getting that for you." So yeah, we never got that. But man, I to this day that would still be fun as shit to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but I Gran Turismo is so great. Like it's so accurate, and it requires like you can literally like hone your skill as a driver. I mean, it's kind of evidenced in the movie here, but it's truly a simulator, and it still has all this competitive nature to it, like a game does. And I think one of the coolest things about it is you can truly build a car. Like you can, you know, if you race in the game, you win money in the game, and you can use that money, those credits, to build cars and modify your car and make it a better race car. And I think the first 2 Gran Turismos, that wasn't quite as noticeable. Like when you were actually playing, like driving the car in the game, it wasn't as, you couldn't feel it as much. But Gran Turismo 3 really ramped that up, and it was really a big difference. And you could totally transform a car, and you could sit there and tweak it and like change all these angles. And like I remember, like you'd get to a level and like there'd be a race, and like you'd get to it and you'd put your car in and you get smoked, and then so you'd go back to the garage and try different things and like try to change the ratios in your transmission gears and shit like that. And I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm just gonna try shit. Go back, try the race again, see if it's any better. And sometimes it wasn't, sometimes it was. And I, for whatever reason, really enjoyed that. It's pretty nerdy. Like
that's
so yeah, I was kind of poised to kind of like this movie a lot for that reason. Like I have a lot of nostalgia for Gran Turismo. So
nice. It's funny. I do too. I really love this franchise. I played the hell out of it in several different incarnations, but most recently I played a bit of Gran Turismo Sport, which was on PlayStation 4, which is a weird like change up in it. I think it was more online based racing. I think I mostly just did the career path thing. But it's funny because like throughout every single one, when I would get frustrated and everything and have to tweak things, I would have to like you, I would be like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Like the gear ratio, the transmission, whatever, I would just do it. And then it would like be like borderline undrivable. And I would just be like, I'm done. Fuck this. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this. So like, I wasn't willing to put in the work to learn anything about it, but it's just interesting that the game had that, like it does have a steep learning curve, but it's really, really, immersive in terms of the racing and everything.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah. Sometimes you were just sitting there running a bunch of races just to make money. So you could like, like I got to upgrade the brakes on this one fucking car and it's going to take 150 grand. So I know I can win these couple races. So I'm just going to do them over and over and win money. And like, it's silly, but then you get it and you're like, yeah. And you can finally, it's silly, but it was fun.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's our history with the games. So to kind of softly go into the review, Gran Turismo out in theaters August 25th. There are some preview screenings and everything that have happened. And the premise, according to IMDb, is based on the unbelievable, inspiring true story of a team of underdogs, a struggling working-class gamer, a failed former race car driver, and an idealistic motorsport exec who risk it all to take on the most elite sport in the world. The movie was directed by Neil Blomkamp, and writers were Jason Hall and Zach Balin, with a story by credit by Jason Hall and Alex C. And the cast includes David Harbour, Orlando Bloom, Archie Medekwi, and Jaman Hansu. Tiny, the next question I want to bring up before we get into the kind of non-spoiler section of the review, Neil Blomkamp, what? Mm-hmm. How do you feel about him? Like, what has his career trajectory done for you as a consumer of his work?
I was surprised at the end of this movie to see his name pop up. I had no idea he directed this. I kind of forgot about the guy. I feel like he came out of the gate really strong with District 9, and that was a really clever movie that was really well made, and a lot of people liked it. I think it was a unique and interesting film, but it also reached a very wide audience. But the problem is, I don't feel like he, as a storyteller and a writer, just did not branch out enough and didn't do enough to make himself unique. It felt like he was making slight variations to the same story in the same movie for like 3 or 4 movies in a row. Like with Chappie and Elysium weren't different enough from District 9. It just sort of felt like almost rehashes of that same movie. And I think we talked about this. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but they just weren't that different of movies. And it seemed like he was sort of bogged down as a director and just wasn't really diversifying his storytelling techniques. And I sort of lost interest in it, in him as a filmmaker, which is really kind of a shame. But I think he's been doing a lot of kind of B-list movies too. I guess you could almost call them like straight to DVD kind of things over the last several years or whatever, or like shorts. I don't even know.
Like I just saw that on his list, and like there's a lot of short films. I don't know where they went or what they were for or anything, but he had one movie called Demonic that I had never really even heard of. Yeah. So it's kind of, I think I don't know if he's necessarily been in director jail, but he hasn't been really making features or anything. He had that whole big thing where his idea for a new Alien movie that would have taken place, I think, after Aliens.
Yeah.
But I think that all kind of fell apart.
Yeah, I kind of remember that, but I don't know. I wonder, I'd be curious to see him direct something that's not like something that he was involved with the creation of the story on. Like if he just got someone else's script and story and just directed it, I'd be interested. Which, I mean, I think that's what he did with Gran Turismo here. Yeah. But this seemed like a bit of a, for him anyways, it seemed like a bit of a, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Like you're like, Gran Turismo and Nissan were kind of like, let's get at least a decent named director to do this. Oh, Neil Blomkamp, let's just get him. And Neil Blomkamp was like, I could use a nice paycheck. So that's, I have no idea if that's what happened, but that's just kind of what it seems like to me.
That's the vibe I get too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not writing the guy off or anything. It just seems like he's sort of given up a little bit.
Yeah. It's,
I don't know.
Yeah. It's a shame. And I mean, I'll echo those sentiments exactly, but like District 9 still is really good. I haven't revisited it in a while, but I have very fond memories of it. And then I think even in the moment, Elysium, haven't seen it since the theater, honestly, in 2013. But I remember liking it, but just not really liking it all that much. And kind of making excuses for it, maybe. And then Chappie, Chappie was just off the rails. I could not. I hated that movie. So yes, but Gran Turismo does seem like it's the kind of movie that it's a brand first. Like, it's clearly like something that the executives and the people involved with this movie know what they want out of the movie. And they knew that particular aesthetic that they wanted to hit. And I think that he did a good job. I think that overall the movie looked really good. I have some issues with it that we'll get into when we talk about it, but overall, I mean, I'm curious to see what he does next, but I had no qualms with his directing in this movie.
Me either.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. How did you feel, in non-spoilers, about Gran Turismo?
So I think Gran Turismo was a movie that set out what it was trying to achieve. I don't think this was trying to be a groundbreaking action film or a groundbreaking racing film. I think it was, they had their own unique story about some video game players who become real life race car drivers, which is a true story. And that's pretty cool. And they wanted to tell that story, and they did. And I think it was perfectly serviceable in telling that story. But this isn't, I don't know that this will be particularly memorable for anyone necessarily, even someone like me who has a lot of nostalgia for the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know if it'll be memorable, but I think it was a good time. I think this is a movie, especially if you go see it in the theater, I think you can totally have a good, entertaining time with this. It totally hits the right notes for a racing action movie. But it's also riddled with a lot of problems. I mean, the script is really just not very good.
Yeah.
Especially the dialogue is just not creative. There's a handful of pretty decent scenes, actually, dialogue scenes, but they're kind of cheapened by a lot of the other ones. Character development is really lacking, especially for certain characters. I think the main character, played by Archie Madekwe, Jan Mardenborough. They call him Yan or John? Was it Yan? What they call him? Yan. That's what I thought. Okay. I think he had a pretty good arc, actually. Like I was happy with that character for the most part. I think it was a little predictable and not unique really, but I think they set out what they wanted to achieve with his character. But then the other two characters, played by Orlando Bloom and David Harbour, were just very one note, and didn't get, especially Orlando Bloom's character got no development at all. Was basically just a talking head almost. And David Harbour, they tried to give him some things to do, and he made do with what he had. He did okay, but it's just, the character was just very very cliched and just not layered really at all. Nothing to peel back for the character. So definitely issues with the movie. But at the end of the day, I think the depictions of the racing and stuff like that, like I feel like it can be difficult to actually capture speed on and racing on film. I think we maybe had a similar conversation with the movie that came out a couple of years ago, Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah.
Which I really liked that movie.
Me too.
And still like that movie. And I think I kind of brought that up with that movie, that it can be difficult to really demonstrate speed, and it's what it feels like to be behind the wheel of a race car. Not that I know what that's like, but I feel like that ball is dropped in a lot of racing driving movies, and I think they did a pretty solid job here. Ford versus Ferrari was better in that even in that regard, it was better. But this was, again, pretty edge of your seat, thrilling in that regard. I respect it for that, and I had a pretty good time with it.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like you maybe liked it a bit more than I did. Not that I hated it or anything by any stretch. It's perfectly serviceable. To kind of echo your thoughts, it is likely not going to be a very memorable movie. I don't know how it's going to fare in terms of box office or anything, but it's something that I think that in the moment people might get, especially in like the late summer season, they might get something out of it. But really for me, the biggest thing detracting from my enjoyment of this movie is the storytelling. The storytelling I thought was borderline atrocious in some parts. Like, I can talk in more specifics and spoilers, but like, there's like the whole like Gran Turismo Academy thing, which is a very interesting thing that happened in a very interesting part of the story. The majority of it is in like a montage, including the introduction of like an antagonistic character. Like the movie just shows us this montage and then introduces this character as like, oh, this is the guy's like main opponent in this academy thing. So keep an eye on that. And it's just like there are a million different ways to introduce that antagonistic relationship in a way that is much more narratively satisfying. But they just did it in a montage, which just felt really just weird. There's a bit, and this is borderline nitpicking, but there's a bit toward the beginning before all of that. It's in the trailer. It's where he and his friends are driving away, like in like a pursuit by the police. And it feels like in the moment, that part in the movie is in the moment pretty satisfying. It's pretty solid, but I would be shocked if that scene wasn't like in some like early draft of the movie, and then when they started making like the production draft or whatever, like when they were starting production, they're like, let's just keep this in. Let's keep this in from this early draft, because it does not feel like it belongs in this movie at all.
For sure.
It is like so jarring because it is so not what the movie is at all. It feels like it's a completely different movie in that scene. But when the movie kind of goes into the whole like underdog story and everything, like there are pieces of it that are pretty satisfying and pretty enjoyable. Even though it does feel like it is that classic example of a true story that is, if not embellished for the sake of movie, for movie making, if not embellished, then just altered enough to make it movie appropriate, I guess. Like it veers into pure like cliche in terms of the way that it's structured and everything. And it has every single, like, it feels like that particular like underdog sports story. Like, I don't know exactly what the true story is or anything, but I feel like this is an example of a movie that feels very much like they took the bare bones of the true story of this kid who became a professional race car driver through Gran Turismo and Gran Turismo Academy, and decided to butter it up with movie tropes and cliches to package a feature film out of it, which is fine if you're okay with cliches and everything. But it just in terms of the narrative of the story, it just didn't work for me hardly at all. So those are the big like issues I had with it. Something I actually really enjoyed about it, and this is where I'm kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what my rating is going to be at the end of the day. Maybe I'll talk myself up to a 2.5 stars out of 5. Right now it's at like, I think 2 stars. But the thing that I actually really liked was the way that the movie incorporates the visuals and the like heads up display and everything, and the visual aspects of the video game in the race sequences, that I thought was very clever and maybe even underutilized in some points, because I would have watched every race scene with that aesthetic, with that heads up display and everything. Because I just think that that's really, really a unique way to bridge the gap between video game and movie. So it really had that going for it. And I think that they did a very good job at capturing the action of race car driving. Not nearly as good as like Ford v Ferrari or even Rush from Ron Howard from several years ago. But it holds its own in that regard too. So yeah, so it's kind of a mixed bag for me.
Yeah, for sure. I like that you brought up the word cliche, because it's just a bag of cliches. Like there's to amplify your point. Like you could go to every major note of the story and it's a cliche. Like there's almost nothing that's not. So that's really true. One of the other issues I kind of had, I really appreciated the visuals as well. I think they spent money in some areas. Like obviously they traveled. Like I think they actually went to different parts of Europe. Maybe even went to Dubai. Some other exotic locales to film the movie. But I think where they kind of cut corners is some of like the cars and some of the action is CGI.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's not like it's crappy CGI or anything, but there obviously sometimes in the movie, some of the vehicles get wrecked. And there's one wreck in particular where it's clearly like they did not wreck an actual car. It's clearly CGI, and it's not like egregiously bad, but it's not very good either. And like, I understand that car in real life is probably like well over $1 million.
Yeah.
Like, so I understand to get one of those cars and just wreck it like is a bummer. And so like, I understand that, but I would have preferred more realism in that regard. Cause again, same thing happened in like Ford versus Ferrari or Rush, the two films you just referenced, but it felt real. Like there could have been some CGI in those as well. I'm sure there was, but it felt more real. It felt grounded, like they actually had some practical effects. It felt like any vehicle in this movie, any race car that wasn't a Nissan GTR was mostly CGI, or at least heavily CGI. And again, does not look bad. It does not look bad, but it's just, I would have preferred a little more grounded realism in this, considering it's a real story too. It's a true story. And those cars exist. Like you can build a fake concept car, like one of these supercars. Like you could do that. I mean, another movie that kind of came to mind was Need for Speed with Aaron
Paul and Michael Keaton.
Aaron Paul. Yeah, a few years ago. And I mean, and that movie was over the top and kind of goofy, kind of fun too, but I think they're decently comparable movies based on video games.
Yeah.
But that one was a little more grounded because they took some supercars and fucking wrecked them in that movie.
Nice.
So yeah, I don't know. Like that's a minor issue in my book, but I just would have appreciated a little more grounded practical effects sometimes.
Yeah, I totally get that. Is the crash you're referring to, is that the big one in the
Actually,
movie?
I didn't have an issue with that big wreck. There was one that involved like the car was like gold.
Yes.
It wasn't actually a car that he was driving. It was like one of the other guys wrecked, the kind of villain, if you will, the villainous driver. The douchey guy, that car, I don't know what it is. It was like a gold and black car. That one, it just didn't look very good. That big wreck, to avoid spoilers, that big wreck, I think that looked pretty good actually. Like,
I thought so too.
It was CGI, but I think they did a pretty good job with it. But again, that was a Nissan GTR. So like Nissan was probably like, here you go, here's 15 GTRs, do what you want with them. And yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in spoilers, because that was a big point of contention for me as well. In the, like that for me, that it presented some narrative issues for me. But it's funny you bring up Need for Speed. I never saw it, but it's just funny that there's, two like video game adaptation. I'm sure there's probably more that I'm blanking on, but it'd be an interesting double feature. But the locales in this movie were really interesting. As someone who played the games and everything, and I'm sure that you probably had the same thought, but what is it? It's the Nürburgring.
Yes.
That track, like that, as soon as that was as soon as they showed it, I was just like I got a little bit of anxiety because I know that track from the video game from that. And I'm just like, that is a grueling one, but it is also the best one. So I don't know. I just kind of geeked out over that. Yeah.
Me too. I mean, seeing the Nürburgring and seing Le Mans and all that, I totally geek out, and it's hard for me to not like it for that reason. Yeah. But I have a relationship with Nürburgring as well. That's, I think it's 8 minutes to do a lap. I think in an F1 car, it's 7 and change to do a lap at the Nürburgring. That's just bananas.
But it's so interesting too that it's so gorgeous and everything. The way it's I would have watched the whole third act of the movie could have been there. And I would have been floored by it. I would have been so into it. I would have watched an entire race on that course in this movie. And that be the third act of the movie. That's the kind of that's the emotion that I bring into it from my experience in the video games. So I didn't have anything too critical about that, just that I thought it was cool to see. The Le Mans stuff I really liked too. Although as soon as that was brought up, which we'll talk about in spoilers, at that point the movie kind of made itself into, and maybe this is a bias on my part as a viewer, but it immediately made me think okay, now I'm seeing the ways that this movie is inferior to Ford v Ferrari, which I loved Ford v Ferrari. So maybe it's not fair to just bring that into Gran Turismo, but as soon as they bring up Le Mans, I'm like, okay, let's mentally kind of just think about how they're depicting everything versus how Mangold depicted everything in Ford v Ferrari a few years ago.
Right.
So that kind of was an uphill battle for this movie that I don't think it really cleared, because I didn't think that was as satisfying, nearly as satisfying as Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I agree.
What about performances? How did you feel about, you talked a little bit about Orlando Bloom and David Harbour being one note. Orlando Bloom, man, he is the most one note person in this entire, it is frustrating how weak the script is for that character. You don't even get you really don't even get the sense of why he's interested in doing this or why he's doing this. He is just the PR guy. And it is just it's so bonkers just how it's so impossible. It sets him up for failure as an actor, because there's no way that he could elevate it. It was so one note.
You could have had Daniel Day-Lewis in the fucking role, and it would have been just as bad.
Oh yeah.
It's really not Orlando Bloom's fault, which I don't consider him a particularly great actor. He's serviceable in a number of roles, but that's about all I could really say for the guy.
Yeah.
I fully agree. The character could probably not be more shallow. In lack of depth. Yeah. I mean, it was insane. David Harbour, I like him as an actor, but I can't articulate why, because well, he does something that really annoys me. he does this in it's mostly when he's a lead actor or when he's like one of the leads.
Mm-hmm.
When he's I think about, he had like a tiny role in the couple Bond movies, like as a CIA kind of guy.
Okay.
When he's like a fourth or fifth down the cast list, I think he's more enjoyable. But when he's a lead, I feel like the guy just yells.
Yeah.
He just yells, and like he does it a ton on Stranger Things. He did it in the Hellboy remake he was in, which could have been a decent movie, but was ultimately not that good. I thought he was fine as Hellboy, but again, he just kind of yells, and he does it in this movie too. Like it's like he's permanently a drill instructor who's just yelling at people, and it's not creative. And like I feel like if I see him in another role where he's doing that, I'm not sure I'm going to like him as an actor anymore, because it's just it's really tired. And his character was a walking cliche.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, literally just taken from every sports movie. But he was fine. Like, I mean, the character was okay, and that can be a satisfying storytelling tactic and technique to have a character like that who is influencing your up and comer and stuff like that. And it's a cliche, but it's fine, and it can be really satisfying. Like Creed,
yeah,
that movie, that played on that trope, but it was really good in that movie, and that was a really good movie. And it just wasn't written particularly well in this movie.
No, and like he's supposed to kind of explain, or he's supposed to be the voice of how outlandish and ridiculous the entire enterprise of making video gamers into professional race car drivers. Like, he's supposed to be the kind of embodiment of why that's ridiculous, or why that would be offensive to actual like race car drivers and everything. And it is just all surface level. It is all, like you said, like he's the drill instructor. He is the most cliched depiction of that. They don't give him anything nuanced in that particular part of his character. What they give him like nuance for is his backstory, which comes out late in the movie and is, again, and maybe it's part of the true story. Maybe it is. I don't know, but on paper and in the movie, it is like the most cliched and predictable and just lifeless, like piece of backstory you can possibly do in this type of movie. It is something that's been seen in any number of like hard-ass coach mentor relationships in sports movies. It is the quintessential trope of that genre for that character. And it is just so agitating because the movie kind of just rests on the cliches. And it just feels like, and this is going to be probably a little bit more incendiary than I want it to be, but it honestly feels like, given that this is PlayStation Studios, this is a video game adaptation and everything, it honestly feels like this is a studio thing where the studio in question, Sony and PlayStation, are even less equipped to really understand the ins and outs of filmmaking and storytelling in film. So they just are putting together this movie full of cliches and full of what they think, the just general movie is supposed to be. And so there's just not enough room for any kind of nuanced storytelling or anything unique. And that falls on so many different aspects of the movie, and especially on David Harbour's character's backstory. So I don't know. It just felt very cliched.
Yeah. I think the standout performance, I mean, I want to give it I want to give it to the kid, the Archie Madekwe kid, because I think he did actually a pretty good job. And
I think he did too.
His character had the most meat to work with, you know. And I think again, just did a good job. There were some emotional arcs. There's some little bit of romance for him, and you know, parental stuff and everything like that. But it's hard not to give it to Jaimin Hunsu.
Oh yeah,
because he damn near steals the movie in one scene. Like it's the only good emotional scene in the whole movie.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah. And again, he's a walking cliche as well. An annoying cliche, but he's supposed to be, but he could have been written that character could have been written way better, just like a lot of them could have. But that one scene, I was like, dang, bro. I mean, you didn't have to go for an Oscar in Gran Turismo, Chief. I was like, dang, he just, you know, I'm not going to spoil it, but I was really impressed with Jaimin Hunsu that he brought it that hard for that scene.
Absolutely.
But Archie Madekwe was kind of keeping up with him in the scene, and I was like, kudos, kid. That's a job well done. So,
yeah. Oh, I agree with all of that. Yeah.
Awesome. There was a part of the movie that I'm going to try not to go on a rant tangent here, but like, there's a part of the movie where Jan he wins the contest, becomes the driver, and he's getting set up with his team, with David Harbour's character, and he's like, David Harbour's character is like, everyone's going to hate you because you're a sim racer and you shouldn't be here. You don't belong. Everyone's going to hate you. And I get that. That's part of the story. That's a good conflict, you know, opportunity for conflict. But there's a part in the movie where someone from his pit crew, like he's climbing into his car and his pit crew, like this guy says something really shitty to him, like, hopefully you don't die or something like that. And he kind of laughs. And I was just like, I didn't have an issue with it from a storytelling or a performance standpoint, but like that, like, just to nerd out on the racing of it, that doesn't fucking happen in the racing world. And because like, if you watch any race, if you watch the winner of the race, his whole pit crew comes out into the winner's circle with him. The driver goes around and shakes all their hands and knows all their names, and they're friends and they respect each other, and it's a big deal. And
they're a team.
They're a team. And I've witnessed it behind closed doors too. I had the pleasure of working on a fire alarm system for a IndyCar race team here in Indianapolis, and it was super cool. And one of the drivers showed up. Now this driver had like one season in IndyCar. I'm not going to say who it was or anything, but like nobody would really even know who he was. Frankly, it's not Mario Andretti or something. Yeah. Okay. So, but like
Helio Castroneves.
No, not him. I'd probably be dead if it was him. I would have died right there. But anyways, this driver showed up to the shop, and there's all these mechanics, there's office people, everybody. There's a janitor cleaning up. And I kid you not, this driver, after like, this was like a Monday. So this was like after a weekend of probably like testing or something. It was off season, but he comes back to the shop, and I kid you not, he goes around to every single person in there and shakes their hand and says hi to him and says, "Hey, how you doing?"
Nice.
And knows everyone's name, and they all talk to him and they're happy to see him. And I was like, I was really happy to see that, because that was behind closed, like he wasn't on camera, he wasn't out of the track, no one was recording it. That's genuinely how those people are with each other. And like, it's like you said, they're a team. And you know, if in that movie, if I was David Harbour's character, I would have gone up to that guy and been like, "Get the fuck out of here right now."
Yeah.
There are 1,000 people who would take your spot and be psyched about it and be psyched to working with this kid right now. And like, again, I understand why it's in the movie, and like, I'm not saying it's bullshit or anything, but I was just like, in the moment, I was like, "That son of a bitch! Like, get the fuck out of here, guy! You don't belong here." It was me nerding out for no reason.
No, I think that's a very valid reason, because for me, like not having that context or anything, well, I mean, I'm aware from, just osmosis, having lived in Speedway in my life, but like the problem that I had with it was narratively, like that is like a completely like superfluous plot line in the entire movie. Like there is like that scene, and then there's a resolution scene where it just like it is as perfunctory as that scene was in terms of being like, oh yeah, we set up this whole thing about your crew not liking you. Let's have a scene where they're like, oh, well, I respect you now. It's like, okay, fine. Okay, why not make that a more pivotal part of the movie if you're going to introduce it? But I don't know. Again, just riddled with cliches and formula that just doesn't really make for a very interesting film experience.
Perfunctory was a good word for it.
Thank you. Yeah. But Archie Medekwe and Jaman Hansu were really good. They were the standouts of the movie, especially in that one scene. So yeah.
Totally.
Do you want to go into spoilers for Gran Turismo?
Sure, yeah. I don't know how much we'll have to spoil, but
I just have a couple of things I want to kind of nitpick a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
But before we do that, what star rating did you give this, and would you recommend people see it?
I admitting my bias, I gave it 3 stars, which is totally generous. Like I think it's more of a 2-star, 2.5 at best. It's hard for me to hate on anything racing because I just like I genuinely had my adrenaline was up, and I appreciated all the stuff they achieved with the movie as far as the racing goes. So I struggled to fault it too much because I feel like that stuff redeemed all of the crappiness of the movie. So I generously gave it 3 stars.
Nice. I'm going to come down at 2 stars. It wasn't offensively bad by any stretch. It wasn't anything that, like, it is at best forgettable for me. The standouts of it were pretty much visual aesthetic things, like the kind of way that it incorporates the design of the video game into the racing sequences. That worked really well for me. But in terms of plot and dialogue and overall writing, it did not gel with me in any meaningful way, despite a very good, like, emotional single scene between the two of them late in the movie. So 2 stars, didn't really like it. We're going to go into spoilers for Gran Turismo. To bring us into that, I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. So if you want to skip the spoiler section, check the show notes in your podcast app or at obsessiveviewer.com/OV397. We're going to play a clip from the trailer and then spoil Gran Turismo.
Yes, we're not going to jail! Oh, crap.
Listen, son. You think you're gonna play a stupid video game about cars and you're gonna become a race car driver?
All I ever wanted to do is be a racer. I'm doing it.
The 10 of you are the best Gran Turismo players in the world. Now is your chance to race real cars.
This is insane.
It's not gonna work. The guys who race are elite athletes. Your kids are scrawny little gamer kids.
That's where you come in.
Okay, so spoilers on for Gran Turismo, and I want to start off by talking about that. Really, the biggest issue I had narratively with this movie was the way that the crash at the Nürburgring, the way that crash catapulted him into going for 24 hours of Le Mans. I thought that was so weird, because I just did like a cursory Wikipedia search, and like he did like some 24-hour racing, I think, like his team did, and he built up toward that. Like that all really happened in terms of him competing and getting like his team getting like 3rd place, I think, and being on the podium. Like that's great, but again, to have the movie just shortchange that to be like, okay, we're going to have him be in this wreck. I don't know if the wreck actually happened, but to have literally nameless people die, like that felt very, not even manipulative. It just felt very lazy. Like you don't, like, there's nothing there. It is completely script structured to be like, okay, now we need to go into the third act. And to have that be like, okay, we're going to prove ourselves by doing 24 Hour of Le Mans. Like, I actually got pissed off a little bit that, like, I started siding with the invisible contingent of people in the racing world who hate this kid because how dare he think that, like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to be like, I'm going to compete in 24 Hours of Le Mans. Like, that is like, especially after seeing Ford v Ferrari, like, that is a massive sporting event and endurance. I could not reconcile, like, my feelings about that with I couldn't suspend my disbelief, honestly. So that was a big sticking point for me. How did you feel about that kind of, that narrative switch up and that narrative thing?
Yeah, I didn't have as much of an issue with it as you did. My issue with that whole arc from the wreck and then going all the way through to the climax of the film with getting the podium at Le Mans, my issue with it is it felt rushed. Like, I feel like that needed to be, I mean, that probably accounted for 40 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
It needed an hour because I feel
100%.
Yeah, him dealing with the, reconciling, frankly, just killing someone, unintentionally, obviously, but the death of a person, him reconciling that in that amount of time didn't make sense. It should have been a bigger deal. And then again, yeah, you're right. The one scene I liked was the fact that, like, once he was out of the hospital, like within a day or two, David Harbour forced him to go to the track and finish his lap. I thought that was actually kind of cool. And, like, I actually kind of appreciated that because I think that's true. I think race car drivers have talked about that before. Like, if you don't get back in the car before that fear sets in, that fear will set in and it will take over you and ruin you. Like, I think that's a real thing. And I kind of appreciated that scene, but I feel like he just gets over it so quickly, and then jumping to probably the most prestigious race in the world. Like, I hate to say that being from Indianapolis, but that's a different conversation. That's just such a big jump. You don't just jump into endurance racing. Like, that doesn't happen. But at the same time, it's pretty cool storytelling. Like, if that's, you're totally right. Like, I'm not giving you friction at all, but I mean, I wish we could have had more time with it. I'll put it that way. What was the runtime of this? I should have looked, because I feel like
I think it was just shy of 2 hours.
Was it? Okay, I thought it was close. Once I'm looking, I got the IMDb right here. Let's see. It was 2
hours and 15 minutes.
It does not feel like it.
No.
Man, so yeah, to add much more time wouldn't have been a very good idea, I don't think, because that would have gotten arduous, maybe. But I don't. And again, on the other hand, I don't know where they would have cut. I mean, that stupid police chase for sure. The
police chase, and, like, I hate to say it too, because it's probably the most interesting part of the movie in terms of storytelling, and the most unique part of the movie for something that all around it is a complete cliche, but. The Gran Turismo Academy, I don't feel like they did anything really worthwhile with that at all, and
super rushed for sure.
So rushed, and just like it's built up to be like it's supposed to be, like, introducing like Orlando Bloom is kind of duplicitous, and he wants, like, at the end of the race, he wants the more polished media guy to win. And, like, that is lame. It just didn't work at all for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And also I like the love interest character. That could have been cut out entirely. Like,
For sure.
there is nothing of substance there for me. We don't even get a good introduction to her. Like, all we get is like, oh, he has a crush on this girl that he knows. She is going away to college or something, and now that he's famous, he's gonna rekindle things with her. Like, there is really nothing there. It feels like an example of a studio that doesn't understand how movies work, or they understand it only as marketing, or only as figuring out like, okay, well, we need to check off this box so that we appeal to this crowd, or like, we need to do literally the bare minimum to introduce a romance subplot so that, you know, women in the audience or people who don't care about racing and want a more romantic story aren't bored for 5 minutes of the 2 hour and 15-minute runtime. Like, it just feels so pandering and cliched, and the movie is like riddled with those. Like, it feels like it's just so cliched and formulaic in such a way that it's so weird how much it is kind of that formula is fighting against something that I think is a really interesting visual technique with incorporating the visuals of the video game in the racing scenes.
Yeah.
It's just so mixed up. It's so frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. They should have cut the love story. That was pointless, essentially.
Yeah. And then when we get the reveal of David Harbour's backstory, and yeah, fine. I don't even remember it. Like, he basically was in a wreck that, like, in the same situation that Jan was in, I guess. Someone died in a wreck that he was at fault for.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. You're telegraphing that the entire movie, but fine, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That was, again, I it needed to be in the movie, but honestly, I would have liked to see it. I would have liked to have a flashback, essentially. Like, I think that would have been kind of good, but I don't know. I don't know where the hell they would have fit it in between.
No, me neither.
Jan texting his love interest.
Yeah. And the quick rush of montage where it's so frustrating. The GT Academy, that again, I'm just they introduced characters in a montage that, and it's like, fine, okay, this is just going to be like the second act of the movie. This is just like his origin story. Like, that's fine. But the fact that they bring back the characters to be part of his team for Le Mans, like, do a little bit more to beef them up. Like, don't introduce them in a montage and then basically just have another montage where everyone's getting cut from the academy, except for the three remaining ones or whatever, and then those are the ones that are going to be the teammates later. Like, it's just so lazy. It is so incredibly lazy and frustrating.
I agree.
Yeah.
The kind of last point I have, and I probably should have brought it up before spoilers, but I feel like the movie was also a little over edited. Especially from a visual standpoint, it felt like early Michael Bay-ish, like super quick cuts with some of the racing. Like, I hate to keep comparing it to Ford v Ferrari, but like, I felt like that was much more nuanced as depicting all of the visuals and the way the racing feels and all that stuff. And you see the brakes glowing and the shocks bouncing and all the grit flying and all that cool shit. Like, they had that in this movie, but it didn't feel as seamless or as incorporated as it did in Ford v Ferrari, or actually even like I'm kind of thinking back to like the first Fast and Furious movie. Like,
that's what I thought too. Yeah.
Yeah, like they like take you through an engine where the fuel gets ignited and moves the pistons and all that. Like they show you that, and that's pretty cool. And like I think it's effective in that movie, and they showed it in this movie, and it wasn't ineffective, but it just wasn't. I feel like it was an editing issue. It could have been stringed together much better. And I think part of it was kind of budgetary. I think part of it was runtime. I think part of it was just like Neil Blomkamp going for his paycheck and was like, let's film this shock bouncing while they're going around a corner. Like, that'll be good, and throw it in there. There you go. Like I don't know. It wasn't awful, but I think it could have been a lot better.
Yeah, I definitely see what you mean there. And I agree. It did feel, it felt a little bit, not unclear, but it felt like they were doing a lot of heavy lifting in the edit to make it more coherent. It just all the racing, every racing scene just felt like quick cuts around, and it felt like it was a little bit of shortcuts taken. Maybe they didn't have like enough time to really film the sequences the way that they wanted to, and they had to cut around them, or they didn't plan enough. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely get your point there. Yeah, I
think the Le Mans race was the best. Like that felt pretty good, and I was fairly happy with that one. But every other race just felt choppy and over edited. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else on this. Will you see it again? Will it be in your rotation of racing movies that you, I'm sure, watch all the time?
I will probably watch it again at some point. Nice. Around February, March, April, I kind of get the racing kind of bug, and I want to watch something. So I will. I've watched the movie Rush several times.
Nice.
Ford v Ferrari, I've seen more than once for that reason. Just kind of get me in the racing mood after the doldrums of winter and looking forward to May and the Indy 500. So I'll probably watch it again, I think.
Nice. I might eventually at some point. Who knows? Yeah, I didn't hate it, but there isn't enough story-wise to really leave a strong impression for me. So yeah. That's kind of where I'm at with Gran Turismo. Yeah. So
that's fair.
Yeah. Interesting PlayStation movies. Sure. Did you ever see Uncharted?
I did. It seemed kind of similar, like pretty forgettable, really.
Yeah.
The best part about that movie was some sort of satisfying chemistry between Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg, actually. Like, nothing incredible. I mean, it wasn't great, but I was like, I was a little bit surprised at how believable and kind of fun that was. But everything else, I was like, the game was way better.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, that is our review of Gran Turismo. It is in theaters August 25th. I'm not sure when I'm going to post this, because now I'm thinking that I should post it next week, but I'll probably post it on Patreon tomorrow. So Patreon got early access to this. So check out Patreon if you want early access to stuff and a ton of content and everything. But to close out this episode, we're going to do a potpourri section. Tiny, you up for that?
Yeah, quick one.
Nice, yes. So Potpourri is the section of the podcast where we just basically wind down and talk about something that we've watched or something we're looking forward to. It's Potpourri, whatever we want, as long as it smells good. Tiny, are you still going to bring up two things?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up one thing. If you want to do one, I'll do one. You finish out with one.
Sounds great.
All right, so what do you got first for us, Tiny?
So the first one is a limited series called A Small Light. I didn't know this was a thing. Someone we went to high school with just randomly posted about it on Facebook, and I was like, what's that? And she said it was really good, and I was like, okay, and I looked it up and was intrigued. It is about the hiding of the Frank and Van Pels families from the Nazis in Amsterdam during World War II.
Wow.
And it's from the perspective of Miep and Jan Gies, who were the couple that helped hide them. Miep worked for Otto Frank, and she brought them food and kept them hidden for 2 years in the annex in Amsterdam. And so it's from her perspective, and it is absolutely fantastic. I was really blown away by this. I feel like the best part about it is, I mean, this isn't a spoiler because it's a true story.
Mm-hmm.
The only person who survived was Otto Frank in real life. Everyone else died, and I feel like the show wanted the viewers to remember that, because there were times of joy and like fun, and I feel like they were capturing them with the intention of everyone watching it and thinking all these wonderful people are going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know that already, like, because it's like one of the most famous stories in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the showrunners knew that, and I really respect them for that. I think that was a great choice, because it had so much weight to it for that reason, because they chose to do that. I could totally be making that up. That could just be my interpretation. I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
But it was highly effective on me, and I was just heartbroken every time, and like, but in a great way, because it's beautiful to see this family finding happiness and joy in this horrible situation. And the sacrifice that the Gies family made, Miep and Jan Gies, their sacrifice, and how they didn't really complain much. I mean, they could have been arrested and put in front of a wall and shot without a second thought by a Nazi for 2 or 3 years straight. And that is, I don't know that I could do that, frankly.
Yeah.
It's just an incredible story what these people achieved. And I didn't really know anything about Miep Gies. I had never heard of her.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard of her husband, who fought in the Dutch resistance. It's an incredible story. I watched it on Hulu. Looking on IMDb, I see National Geographic and Disney Plus as well. I don't know if it's available on there. I watched it on Hulu. It's 8 episodes, limited series. It's fantastic. And that's nice. What I think it was just Patreon I was talking about, the Diary of Anne Frank. I decided to read it. And obviously, it was inspired by watching this show. So.
Okay, I was wondering if it was which order it was. Like if you, okay,
right, yeah, it's phenomenal. Highly recommend it.
Nice. That as a story, as heartbreaking and tragic as it is fascinating, and I find it interesting the way that you kind of refer to it as kind of highlighting the family, and that makes me really curious to see it. So
yeah, it's really good.
Nice. Okay, so my one potpourri movie that I'm going to bring up is it's a tough one to follow up, Tiny. But it is the Randall Park directorial debut, Shortcomings. It is a romantic dramedy. The plot summary, courtesy of IMDb, is follows a trio of young Bay Area urbanites, Ben Tanaka, Miko Hayashi, and Alice Kim, as they navigate a range of interpersonal relationships while traversing the country in search of the ideal connection. It stars Justin H. Min, who I loved in, it was one of my favorite movies was that last year? After Yang. He played Yang in After Yang.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is Randall Park's directorial debut, and I was really looking forward to it because of that, because I'm a big Randall Park fan in everything that he's popped up in. And I found the movie, especially, I was also looking forward to it specifically because this is the type of movie that I gravitate toward, kind of a low budget indie romantic drama, comedy. Like this is my thing. Like I'm really into it. But the movie kind of is centered around a very unlikable character. And I don't have a problem with that, like, at all. Like, I never have a problem with having, like, an unlikable central character, because oftentimes the character learns a valuable lesson, or oftentimes it is being presented at, a problematic or issue-ridden character is being the focal point of a movie for a specific narrative reason. Here, it feels a little bit insufferable because he is continuously told by many people in his life, point blank, exactly what his hangups are, what his issues are with relationships, with relationships of all kind, and like how he interacts with people. And there's nothing really driving him to make any kind of headway in correcting his behavior. And it's not like it's presented in a way that it's like, oh, I'm just kind of a douchey guy and I'm going to get by however I can. It's not like an anti-hero story or anything like that. It's just like the movie is kind of constructed as a sort of coming of age story a little bit. And it falters on that front because he is presented as having learned his lessons sort of by the end, but there's nothing in the movie that really communicates that like that change in his behavior. It's more like I'm going to change because the movie is an hour and 32 minutes and we're at an hour and 29 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and change. So it was a little frustrating. There are some elements of it that worked a little bit better for me than others. There's a really interesting, like the movie opens with this really interesting kind of formulaic romantic comedy that they're watching, that he's watching with his girlfriend in a movie theater. And it is the most heightened, like it is like the most like big prestigious like romantic comedy thing, and it has two Asian actors at the center of it. And after the movie, he and his girlfriend debate it and talk about it. And he talks about it, like he goes on this rant about how, like, oh, it's like performative representation, and how like the core message of the movie is that as long as you have money, it's all good and everything. It doesn't say anything about like the actual like Asian American experience or anything of value of that. Like he goes on this whole tirade, and I'm like, this is potentially a really interesting movie, because I thought that it was going to be all about him wrestling with like a performatively diverse and inclusive like Hollywood, and it just not being that way, or not being to his liking, which I would have found it to be a much more interesting movie. But instead, it's this relationship thing where he is just kind of insufferable or unwilling to change his behavior, and is in like he isn't even really learning the lessons he should be learning, and it's just people telling him how he behaves and how he should behave, or how he should think about things in certain contexts. And it's an hour and a half, and about an hour into it was kind of exhausting, because there wasn't a lot for me to really latch on to. So unfortunately, I didn't really like it all that much. It's called Shortcomings. It's currently in theaters, but I didn't really like it all that much. So hopefully Randall Park does something better next time around. So,
oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Did you say he didn't write it, did he?
No, it was written by Adrian Tomine, and I believe it's based on a graphic novel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, based on his graphic novel, Adrian Tomine's.
Okay. But the issue wasn't really with the directing, though.
No, it's a competently made movie. I will say that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, so maybe there's hope for Randall Park in the future.
yeah, I hope so, because I genuinely like the guy. So hopefully, hopefully he does something good.
Cool.
Yeah, that is all I got for Potpourri. Do you want to close this out with round 2 of yours?
Yeah, and this will be brief too. I recently watched, I don't know if people know much about this show, a limited series on Peacock called Mrs. Davis. I knew about it because for whatever reason, it was highly promoted on NPR.
Interesting.
Yeah, they'd have like ads for it on NPR. Like this segment of NPR brought to you by the latest TV show on Peacock, Mrs. Davis. And I was like, this is weird that they're promoting it this way, but whatever. So that's how I knew about it. And the reason I was intrigued is because one of the creators is Damon Lindelof.
I just saw that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and this show is dripping with his creativity.
Nice.
Matt, you will like this show.
Okay.
Dare I say love it. I don't know about love it, but because did you really like the Watchmen series he did on HBO?
I did. I enjoyed that. I really liked it. Yeah.
Okay, it is very much in a similar vein to that.
Okay.
This is one of the more creative shows I've maybe ever seen. Just
wow.
From a conceptual creativity standpoint, I was really, really impressed with this movie or the show. It's sort of hard to describe. I don't know if it's supposed to be in the near future, but like essentially a artificial intelligence has permeated society. It's sort of like the movie Her, like that AI in that movie. It's like that where she's basically in our ears, like on a headset through our phones at all times. And she has permeated all levels of society and pop culture. And there is a contingent of a very small majority who is against her and wants to destroy her. And one of them is a nun named Simone, played by a brilliant Betty Gilpin.
Nice.
And she is essentially she is of course married to Jesus Christ. That's what nuns are. But she's actually married to Jesus Christ in the show. Like she can like go into a prayer state and she's like transported to a diner where Jesus is the short order cook at a diner, and that's how they interact with each other. And it's like, it sounds dumb and ridiculous, but it works so well, and it's kind of amazing. And so she gets this, I don't even remember how it goes, but she basically is tasked with destroying the Holy Grail. And if she completes that task, Mrs. Davis, which is the AI, will turn herself off. That's the premise of the show. It's so many different things, and it sounds wacky and nutty, and I think in the wrong hands, it would have failed miserably. But Damon Lindelof hit it out of the park, along with Tara Hernandez, who I'm not familiar with. She was the other creator. It is so fun and just just so creative. The Simone, the Betty Gilpin's character, her parents were magicians, and she was like participated in their act, like as a kind of a MacGuffin sort of character, or like a plant in the audience. Like that was her childhood. She was a plant for her parents' magic show, and so like she has kind of trauma from that. And there's just so much brilliant creativity with the show. It shouldn't work. The show should not work, but it was so fun and just a great time. Betty Gilpin is the standout. She gained notoriety for the show Glow on Netflix.
Okay.
Yeah, which I actually started watching just because of Mrs. Davis. And it's a fun show. She's a amazing actress. Jake Dorman is the male lead. He's really good. One of my favorite character actors, Chris Diamantopoulos, who if you see him, you'll know who he is. He is such a good character actor. Those are kind of all the standouts. Gosh, why can't I think of it? David Arquette plays her dad.
Nice.
So there's a great cast too, but it's on Peacock. I highly recommend it. It's just so fun. I don't know that everyone will love it, but if you liked Watchmen, the Watchmen series, you will. It's like Watchmen, but like way funnier, like way
Nice.
funnier. It's so creative and brilliant. I really, really loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm going to definitely check that out because it sounds right up my alley, honestly. So, yeah, awesome.
High concept show.
Nice. All right. Well, that's Mrs. Davis. It is on Peacock. Do you know if it's a limited series or if it's an ongoing series?
I'm almost positive it's a limited series. I don't think they're going to. I think it was just 8 episodes and done.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, I will definitely check that out. And that will do it for this episode, guys. Guys, Tiny, and to everyone listening. Okay. So that'll do it for this episode of The Obsessive Viewer. Let us know what you thought about Gran Turismo or anything else we talked about in this episode. Don't know what we're going to do next, but check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer for more content, and check out my TikTok at OV Podcasts. And also check out the other shows. Tower Junkies, we're about to finish The Gunslinger soon, and then we're going to be doing some other stuff too, I'm sure. And then Anthology, I'm going to be doing Black Mirror reviews, and then going into season 4 of The Twilight Zone. So check those out. I'm going to start playing us out. Tiny, any parting thoughts for this episode of the Obsessive Viewer podcast?
Nope. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Yeah, thank you guys. And once again, thank you guys so much for listening, and check out patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next episode. And now, enjoy this short clip from our Patreon exclusive RSS feed. For the full clip and more exclusive Patreon content, such as early access to episodes, TV, book, and movie reviews and reaction recordings, commentary tracks, and Patreon potpourri episodes, go to patreon.com/obsessiveviewer and become a patron at the minimum rate of $1 per month. Thank you and enjoy. Which is fine. This is a novella, so there's not a lot of room for King to really do a lot of to do a lot of building out of the story or anything. Like, Craig's friends are not well developed. I think like Margie, Regina, Billy, and then U-Boat, like they're just kind of there. There's not a whole lot of build up there or a lot of character development. So that's a little bit of a shame, but they are used to kind of, I don't know, as set dressing for Craig's experience and everything. But really at its heart, this story is about Craig and his relationship with Mr. Harrigan, and how that supernatural element is potentially like growing a darkness within him. And it's lightly presented there. It's more about the coming of age thing. So anyway,
This podcast was edited and produced by Matt Hurt and presented by ObsessiveViewer.com. You can find links to all of our shows at ObsessiveViewer.com/podcasts. For exclusive bonus content, including reviews, commentaries, and B-roll episodes, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/ObsessiveViewer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.